함께 해주신 여러분, 아트부산 컨버세이션스 프로그램에 참석해 주셔서 감사드립니다. 저는 이번 강연의 모더레이터를 맡은 아트부산의 정석호라고 합니다. 본 강연은 참고로 영어로 진행되며 필요하실 경우 자리에 비치된 리시버를 통해 순차 통역을 제공받으실 수 있습니다. 이번 아티스트 대담 시간에서는 더 이상 어떤 수식어가 필요 없는 현대 미술계의 거장 안토니 곰리 작가를 초대하여 지속 가능한 미래, 탄소 발자국을 주제로 토크를 진행하고자 합니다. 강연 이후 Q&A 시간이 있을 예정입니다. 그럼 이제 본 강연을 시작하도록 하겠습니다. So hi, Mr. Gormley.
Hello, Seokho. How are you?
Good. How are you? Thank you for joining. All the way from not London, right? If I recall.
Yeah, Norfolk.
Norfolk. Okay. It's about 9 a.m. now over there.
Yeah, nine o'clock in the morning, and it's a
9 o'clock.
beautiful.
I can already imagine by looking at your bright face that it's really nice weather over there. It is such a privilege to have you here in our conversations program. And from our brief conversation that we just had during the testing, you told us that you've already been to Korea several times for your major permanent projects. And there are already lots of, I'm sure you, as you may already be aware of, there are lots of Antony Gormley fans here in Korea, along with your important key sculpture works in major museums and private collections. So again, welcome.
Thank you for having me. Thank you for asking me.
So I would like to start with your recent exhibition in Busan. So from fall 2019 to, I believe, April or May 2020, you had an exhibition at Liu Fan Space in Busan Museum of Art. So it was an important exhibition for your fans in Busan, but also for the museum, because it was their inaugural exhibition of the Liu Fan and his friends series. So in the exhibition, you had 4 sculptures and 16 drawings. I believe many people have unfortunately missed it, as the last period of the exhibition was the initial stage of the pandemic. Thus, it will be interesting and meaningful to share your stories about the exhibition and how you get to decide to exhibit specifically at Liu Fan Space.
Okay, so maybe I'll now share my screen and I'll show you. Just a sec. I'll show you the actual works, because it was a wonderful opportunity, and for me to show with a friend, because I met Liu Fan in Kamakura in Japan, where he used to live, where I did a big show, traveling retrospective in Japan that went to 6 museums. And anyway, I love him and his work. So we've known each other, for a long time. And it was a huge privilege for me to be asked to do this inaugural show in his magnificent museum. And I thought that I would try to show the most recent work of mine. Can you see this slide? Okay. So anyway, I thought that I would show them my most recent works, and these are called routers, and it's an idea about trying to map the internal attitude of a body in the manner that, in a way, organic plants move through dark soil, finding their way. I was thinking, start at the core, start in the solar plexus, and then find the energy core of the body. And so in the show, I just had this idea that I would show 4 different positions where this core of the body could be in dynamic relation with space at large. The one on the right here is called Gauss, which is a kind of you might say somebody just putting out their arms to sense maybe the ground, or feeling the heat of the desert. The one behind is falling. This is the same image is seen from a different angle. And the idea really is to almost like a kind of lightning rod to manage to materialize the internal energy of a body. And anyway, I'd never shown these works before, and it was wonderful to be able to show them in such a simple, clear sequence of spaces. This is maybe the most dramatic, the one with just kind of trying to, a body trying to sense its own internal balance, but also, in a way, the extension of the limbs out into space at large, where the arm, the horizontal of the arms is like the horizon itself. So this idea of a kind of stretching out into space, and then the same with this. At the same time, I showed drawings, and I've always used Chinese brushes or sumi brushes for my drawings, and this is a drawing related to another project that is connected to Korea, because BTS, your very famous boy band, paid for a work called New York Clearing, which I did just before the pandemic opened in New York, which was a huge project with 11 kilometers of aluminium tubing making this sculpture. But anyway, along with the sculptures, I showed drawings where I'm showing how I might map these positions. So often I'll do the three axes, the three principal axes by which we understand space in a rational way, the two horizontal and the one vertical, the X, Y, Z axes. And this is the way that architects, in a sense, imagine their buildings. But I'm now using that in a way, diagrammatic way of capturing space to talk about the internal condition of the body. Anyway, I just thought I would go on to talk about this work, which is presently on in Hong Kong, the Asian Field. This is about 200,000 little sculptures that occupy quite a large space. It's about maybe 1,200 square meters of the newly built M+ Museum. And this is another work that I made in Southeast Asia, in the bottom end of the Pearl River, in Huadu, not far away from Guangzhou. Anyway, that will be on now until the 5th of July, even though it's a bit tricky at the moment to get in and out of Hong Kong. And the idea of this work was simply to say, if we completely occupy the space, the cultural space, like a gallery, we can turn the tables on the normal relation between a viewer and an art object. The art object ends up looking at you, the viewer. And, I think of this as being, in a sense, it's called the Asian Field, but it's just asking us each as creative, thinking, feeling individuals what kind of a world we are making. I think of these hand-sized, very swiftly made body surrogates. What are they? They're certainly sentient, but they don't have mouths. They're not fully individualized, but they're very much individual. They are, in a sense, the spirit of those yet to come, the unborn, those that will follow us. Here is 120 tons of earth that has been touched by human hands, passed through fire, made permanent, and now, in a way, is this kind of desert earth that looks back at us, having been given these attributes of consciousness, of eyes, and says, what kind of, or asks us, what kind of world are you making? You that have what we lack, you that have the power to act, you that have freedom, you that have consciousness, you that have empathy, you that have feeling. We, the unborn, are asking you what kind of world you are making, what kind of resources you are leaving for us. Anyway, the show is always accompanied by a response wall on the left. There were 360 participants that helped in the making, and all their names are on that wall at the end. I just briefly show another work that I think also touches on this same, in a way, subject of asking where we fit the living, thinking, free, moving individuals in a wider world. And this is the project Event Horizon, also installed in Hong Kong, where on the skyline I installed 27 just life-sized body forms, and then 4 on the ground that in a way interrogate their world, whether it's the world of high-rise, of corporate late capitalist growth, or in a way the inheritance of the colonial project. The statues of the great and the good, the colonial buildings that were the administrative center of this British colony in the late 19th century. But the real point of these works was really to animate the street, to invite people to look at their own environment, see the relation between the individual and the mass, between, as it were, the singular soul on the ground and this world that we had made that is so much bigger that nobody seems to be in control of. But also the importance of the confrontation. What is this object doing in my world? I'm just going to get the post, and there's this Iron Man in my way. So that thing of a first-hand encounter with something that, in a way, is a foreign object in the natural life of the street. That opportunity of culture, when you could say that field is the positioning of earth materials, of kind of fundamental elemental life within the frame of culture. Here is culture, in a way, interpenetrating with daily life on the street. So I'm very, very interested in testing, as it were, the way in which culture has been both commodified and institutionalized in our time. And another way of doing that is to actually allow life to occupy the place of art. So this is a plinth made in Trafalgar Square for William IV. He wasn't loved enough for the public subscription for his bronze equestrian statue to be paid for. So that we had this project of every few years inviting artists to come and make a work. I just decided that I would make this plinth available for 100 days for an hour each to 2,400 randomly chosen individuals. And you could do whatever you liked on the plinth. It's only 1 meter 20 wide by about 5 meters long. So we had to put a safety net at the bottom in case people fell off. Because a lot of people did quite ambitious things, like this man with his cricket bat and his score of Elgar's great, well, how can we saw it, you know, in English music at its most nostalgic. Anyway, I just thought, sorry, I'm not allowing you to ask me questions. This is my last show in London.
Isn't that from your 2019 Royal Academy show?
Yeah, that's right. So
Okay,
this was.
then I think it'll be
my last
better to
big
save
show
it for
before the lockdown happened.
Can we save this part of the slides for the later part of the conversation? I think that'll be
sure.
good. Okay. But it's as you so as I was listening to your explanation, I was thinking, as always, it's always good and best to be hearing and listening directly from the artist. There's no better way to learn about the artworks. So thank you.
Yeah.
So about the subject, I would like to ask now. I came up with the idea of today's topic after recalling a conversation I had with Q, who was a sales director of Thaddeus Ropac in London, and who is now representing the gallery's Seoul space. So she said to me that your artist studio requests the sales team to submit their annual carbon footprint, and the person who produced the least amount gets a priority in receiving your work, whether that is for fairs or for their private sales. So at first, I assumed she was not 100% serious. But after doing some research about your past interviews and articles, I learned how committed and concerned you are with the environmental issues. And it realized that it may be entirely true. So to me, it was very interesting because your voice and opinion matters and can also have a strong influence on the art world. So could you tell us how you were first influenced by the global environmental issue and what other actions or rules you have been implementing on your own? And also, is it related to your artistic practice and philosophy as well?
Yeah, I think all of us are aware, and I have been aware for many decades, of the gradual loss of species. You know, we know, I mean, when I was a child, when I drove from London to our country house on the coast, that journey, the windscreen of the car would be covered in dead insects. And now, you know, we do the same journey and it's clean. What is that telling us? Well, it's telling us that nearly, 70% of our wildlife is now gone. The climate crisis is very real, and the climate crisis is most powerfully expressed in extinction, in the great sixth extinction that we're in the middle of. This is really serious. We can no longer progress with the idea that culture in some senses is in distinction and in contrast and in opposition to nature. We have to completely revise our ideas about what it means to be civilized. We have to go to the colonized. We have to go actually to those without armies, without banks, without writing, without, in fact, surplus production, to discover the keys of living sustainably. So this is an absolutely radical moment for our culture, because frankly, what has happened in the last, really, since the Enlightenment, in the last 200 years. The fact that art has become commodified and has become institutionalized. Those two effects, which really are the privatization or the specialization of art, that have, resulted in, I think, its retreat from its primary position as a means of collective connectivity. If we think about art before it became an element of high capital exchange, it's a natural part of life. The songs people sing, the dances they dance, the buildings they make to shelter themselves collectively. You may say I'm a romantic, but actually the longest history of art is the one without museums, without galleries that sell art, where art was just an absolutely natural part of every day. And really, if you look at European history, for us, I always think of the cathedrals as the great example of this. Here were, these extraordinary buildings when the rest of the population was living in mud and straw houses. The collective will would make these huge, unoccupiable spaces with their vast, high vaulted ceilings and fill them with images, both three-dimensional and and two-dimensional, that were always open 24 hours, night and day, and in a way celebrated a collective imaginary, and indeed, gave our sense of our lives and our progress through time a bigger dimension, albeit a hierarchy that we might not believe in now, with God in his heaven, devil in his hell, and us somewhere in between. That idea of art as a kind of companion for life, a foil against which we sense our own existence, well, I think that's been rather overshadowed now with the idea of art either as a specialization or as a trophy, as a kind of kudos symbol for personal kind of status. And anyway, I think we've got a lot of we've got a lot of readjustment to do in my view. And in my life, I kind of want to use the energy and time left to me in this last fifth or sixth of my life to make work that can be in collective space, that can be just part of everyday life, that you don't need either to buy with masses of money or pay a ticket in order to see, that it is just there in the world.
Okay, but at the same time, as you also admitted in your past interviews, reducing carbon footprint poses immediate challenges and may not even be realistic to some extent. Let's mention art fairs like Art Busan, for example. Thousands of artworks are being shipped from all across the world, along with gallerists, artists, collectors, and visitors flying across in and out. And not to mention your works in particular, which are normally extremely large scale and heavy. And there's one magnificent sculpture work of yours at Ropak booth in Art Busan. And the weight of that one sculpture was already 580 kilo. So, and even
I feel, even though I'm speaking to, as it were, the a family member of the very, instruments by which this fair is happening, that art fairs themselves have to examine their own rationale. It seems a strange thing to me that in a age of the metaverse, in other words, where we can so easily, like we are doing now, communicate virtually, why we are continuing to transport people and works all over the world when we are already, as it were, one world connected by this virtual network. And all I can say is that I am working hard on a daily basis to mitigate and to lessen my carbon footprint. I now insist that all of my works are not sent by air, that they are sent by the most effective transport, which means, I think that sea transport is not guiltless in terms of carbon footprint, but at least with the right degree of organization, we can use the least heavy method of transporting works. But I think we have to look at the art fair. There's no question that it is the most profligate misuse of resources that the art world possesses. I think that art fairs are amazing, open kind of exchange places for ideas and for the meeting, for people who are interested in culture to meet each other. I wonder if we can do it in a different way, maybe without the transportation of the works, to allow the meeting of people to happen as a mixture of virtual meeting, and like we're doing now, a mixture of the meeting of real people with virtual stimulation. Because I don't see that it's if we take our responsibility seriously, a model that is responsible.
Okay, so what may be some of the challenges, dilemmas, or possible solutions that people in the art world, the entire art community, or even art fairs could immediately or gradually adapt to make the difference?
Well, I think I've just kind of just touched on one, which is obviously the use of the virtual world to make people familiar with works that perhaps don't need to be transported across the world. In terms of the mitigating efforts that we are making at the studio, I mean, maybe the most important thing for you to know is that all of the metal that goes into my work is recycled. We use 92% of the raw material that went into the work that I'm showing at the Busan Art Fair at the ROPAC stand comes from brake shoes and old railway line, the actual rail of a train line that have been melted down and repurposed to make these works. All of the energy that goes into the smelting of those scrap metals comes from renewable sources. We do everything we can in terms of our studio practice to minimize our carbon footprint. At the same time, our carbon footprint is high. We regulate it and monitor it annually. Wherever I can, I take a train. So I was in the Venice Biennale this year. I've just done a show in San Gimignano in Italy, and both the assistants and myself traveled to install that show by train. I mean, these are you could say small gestures, but necessary modifications of behavior. Going forward, I think that I've got to look very carefully at the carbon footprint of my big exhibitions, and we'll be looking increasingly to see ways of making shows with materials that are already on site. So actually the BTS collaboration, New York Clearing, that I made is a very good example of this, where we simply saw what in the metal factors what stocks the metal factors within New York held, were able to source directly, literally within 5 kilometers of where I was making the sculpture, the raw material. And then we simply, took there were me and 3 assistants, came to New York, and then we collaborated with 26, mainly South American fabricators, and we made the work on site. And I think that as a model is going to become increasingly important. It's what intelligent, sensitive, important artists like Richard Long have been doing for decades.
And Antony Gormley too, I think.
Well, no, I'm just beginning. He was an example and an inspiration to me, but I'm only just realizing how brilliant his example was.
Okay, thank you. I think we will now move on to introduce your recent major exhibition, which is the RA show. I read from your past interviews that you are concerned to witness how contemporary art practice seems to distance itself away from the public by making art seemingly difficult. Instead, you said sculptures are not simply artworks, but a space and meaning that provides one to ponder upon life. And in this regards, the audience can respond and react. Thus, a human figure, movement, and participation are key elements in your artistic practice. And this was very clearly shown in your major RA show in fall 2019, which I also visited during Freeze London. This was very clearly shown, the open structure of the works can be expanded or concluded by the participation of the visiting audience. So could you give us a brief recap of the exhibition, as this is such an important show for you?
Yeah. I'm going to share my screen again. Start there with this. So this is the RA exhibition, which was really a form of retrospective, but that wasn't the important thing. I think the important thing was to allow every room to in some way counter or complement the room before. So this is a room with a number of concrete works. These are concrete blocks that hold the space of a body that has been rendered void, and introduces the idea of the body as a place rather than a thing. You could say that the whole history of the statue and the Western fixation, you could say, on the body of the hero, the naked, sexy body of the female, has really dominated the notion of the body in art. And I wanted to reintroduce the body not as a place of portraiture or of storytelling or of narrative, but as a place. The place that consciousness dwells within. And here are 3 blocks. You could say this is a return to, Michelangelo's slaves, or the idea of what is the relation between matter and mind, or you could say the raw material, mass, and energy. The energy of the artist, you could say, but also the energy of the viewer. So here are, you know, three blocks that in some way look like unmediated matter, but in fact they contain the void that is the place of the dark, that is itself dark, evokes the darkness of the body, the place that you are when you close your eyes, but now in a sense made visible through the means of this mass. And then beyond it, in the next room, is a body made into a building, a body made big enough for one to enter. This was just fitted within the room. So you could say that, you know, the previous room encloses these blocks that are in some way architectural. They could be the raw material making a building, but the next building contains this. I mean, the next room contains this single work that is the size of a building. Within that, you are invited to make a journey. And if I go back to that first slide, you can see inside this doorway, this massive Renaissance, majestic doorway, I've inserted a much smaller doorway, a doorway that is 1.50 meters high. So you have to duck down and then even duck down even lower as you go through that. This is actually the left foot. And to make your way into the interior, you have to go even lower as you go through the ankle. Having made that journey, you then come into the torso space, which is this cave-like, resonant, dark space. What am I doing here? I guess I am trying to say, I want you to use your body to explore all of these ways that I'm thinking about the body as a place. In the previous room, you know, you had these blocks and you were invited to empathically inhabit those body voids that were testing their own environment. Here, you're invited to move in ways that perhaps in most museum visits, you wouldn't move. You have to maybe become like a child and crawl again. And through this, I want there to be a degree of proprioception. In other words, awareness of your own journey through space and through time, through light, through darkness. And in a sense, there is no, the physical object is only an instrument by which this awareness arises. And that awareness is the art. So every person, in a way, is making their own work individually, kind of produced by their engagement with the invitation of the work. And that is equally true of this work. So this is the work that I took Grace of BTS to New York and made 3 times bigger. You know, it was massive work. But this is called clearing, where there is no body other than the body of the viewer that comes into this 3-dimensional scribble, this big drawing. You saw the drawing of it in the Liu Fan Busan exhibition that I made. But here, it's your negotiation of this high energy space that in some way completely contradicts the architecture. Here is this is a single line, about, probably 8 kilometers long, without a beginning or an end, that is like a 3-dimensional drawing that you have to move through. And you're equally invited, as you were within cave, to modify your body, behavior. So in order to engage with the work, you have to duck and dive and be careful as you step over one line or another. Anyway, I guess, for me, what is this proposing? This is proposing that the beholder's share, the viewer's share, is active. It is a co-participator in the arising of something that we call art, that is neither intrinsic to the object nor to the means of, you could say, mounting of the object or demonstration of the object, but is a trialogue between the place that the object is shown, the object itself, and the viewer that interact. And that is even more true of something like this. So this is just called coordinate. Those three coordinates that I talked about in the drawings in the Busan show at the Liu Fan Museum, now isolated into space. The longest of these lines was 35 meters. They're under very high tension, but they act to energize space. I mean, while demonstrating absolute orthogonal principles, so these are all at 90 degrees to each other, all of these lines. They are all under very high tension, so they're absolutely straight. But what happens is, as you move into the space, so the lines move in their mutual relations. And again, here is an instrument by which you become aware of your narrative journey through space-time. So this is no longer art as the place of representation, but art as a place of the emergence of a kind of awareness in which the participation of the viewer is intrinsic. Now you can see in the front of this slide of Matrix, one of those lines which went through 3 galleries. This is the 35-meter long line that is under 2.5 tons of lateral tension. But here is a work called Matrix that is 22 chambers that interconnect, that in a way are the skeleton or the kind of hidden interior structure of architecture. In the same way that I think that the Ruta works that I began by describing internal kind of skeleton of our body's energy system. I think of this work as exhibiting or making materially present the hidden neurological kind of basis of our environment. And at the core of this is a empty space that is equivalent to the average size of a European bedroom. It might be a bit smaller in Korea or certainly in Japan. But here is this space that is in architecture, but also removed from architecture, so you can walk under it and look up into its confusing perspectives. So do you want me to stop? I can go on talking like this forever. And
I think you could continue until this slide, this particular room. It was also one of my personal favorites.
This is another example of the internalization of nature into the frame of culture. This is the second largest gallery in the Royal Academy. Into it, I brought 50,000 liters of Atlantic Sea water and 50,000 kilos of clay, of earth dug from the ground. We prepared the room with a pool liner, and this, I think, is similar to field it's simply saying we have to start again in our relationship, in thinking about the relations between nature and culture. Here is something that looks like a vast monochrome painting. You can think of all of the monochromes, whether it's of Yves Klein, or of Rothko. But now this is reality. This is the outside brought inside. And again, it excludes us from the space and allows us to stand as we would on the shoreline of a great ocean and think about our relations with these primary materials, with light, with earth, with air, and with water. I think of this as in a way, a meditation on where life came from. Here is the primal ocean, out of which the whole biosphere comes. And were we finally to, achieve some kind of Armageddon, and that all life, like it did after the great extinction 350 million years ago, it would have to start again from the oceans. So this is a similar kind of point of reference to field, allowing us to think about our responsibilities to the planet.
Okay. I read from the curator of this particular show, Martin Kager-Smith's interview, that it took you 4 years to prepare for this particular exhibition. Is it really true?
Yes, it is. Building needed quite a lot of modification. To take this was only 100 tons or so, but to suspend matrix that was 42 tons, we had to insert quite a lot of beams on top of the beams that were already in the roof there, in order to suspend the expansion works that were 6 tons and 1.5 tons each. We had to put a ring beam in the cupola of the main dome of the Royal Academy, in order to do those high tension wires of coordinate. We had to build a bridge in order to mount a cross beam that was 5 meters long on the outside of the building, in order to take the lateral pressures, in order to put the weight of cave into that gallery. We had to insert many new columns in the interface between the vault below and the floor. But that was only a part of it. There was a lot of other modification, and it's a great tribute to the institution that they were prepared to go to those lengths. And it did take 4 years of preparation of the building for this show to be mounted.
It's even hard to imagine what amount of effort and time and energy it took to create such a magnificent large-scale exhibition. And thank you again for allowing the audience to the opportunity to witness and see and enjoy such an amazing exhibition. And thank you so much for your presentation. I had prepared a few more questions in between and afterwards, but considering the time remaining, I think it'll be better to ask the audience if they have any questions for you. 1 hour is
Good.
always too short.
Okay. No, but that's fine. I'm happy.
이제 작가분에게 질문 있으시면 손 들어주시면 저희 진행해 주시는 분께서 마이크 드릴 겁니다. 그럼 편하게 질문해 주셔도 될 것 같습니다.
될까요?
네.
네. 작가님 작품을 이우한 전시관에서도 보고 여러 번 감상을 했는데 오늘 이렇게 줌으로나마 뵐 수 있어서 감사합니다. 그리고 제 질문은 몸에 관한 작품을 많이 하셨는데 몸이 작가님께 어떤 의미이고 어떤 계기로 몸에 관한 작품들을 시작하게 되셨는지 듣고 싶습니다.
So the question, the comment first of all is thank you for this virtual opportunity to meet you, and thank you for your presentation. And I have visited your exhibition at the Liufan space at Busan Museum of Art, which I also enjoyed. And I'm a fan of your artworks, and I noticed that body is a particularly strong theme within your artistic practice. So I wanted to ask what that means to you and how it all started from the beginning in terms of your artistic practice and philosophy.
That's a big long story, but I'll try and make it short. When I was little, age 6 to probably 9, I was sent by my parents always to go upstairs to have a rest after lunch. I didn't want to rest after lunch. A young boy, you want to be outside, you want to be playing. But anyway, I was obedient child. So I go upstairs, and the bedroom where I had to take my rest was very bright. It was an enclosed balcony on the first floor. Anyway, I used to just lie there, and I'd say, well, I just have to do this. And I couldn't sleep, but I just lay absolutely still. And at first, this red hot, highly claustrophobic space behind my eyes that was red because of the blood in my eyelids, it was like suffocating and really, really claustrophobic. But gradually, over kind of time, I became, through habit, used to it. And the extraordinary thing was what happened, that this space that was so, stuffy and enclosing became darker and cooler, and gave on to experience of in a way a dimensionless space without objects and without edge. And that was the beginning of my understanding that actually the greatest adventures we can do are not climbing high mountains, even though that can be terrific fun, or swimming deep in the sea, but actually exploring the space of consciousness which is given to us by the body. And later, I reconnected with that through meditation practice, particularly Vipassana, that I learned in India. And then, at some point realized that this was my life's work, somehow to say the body is the place of consciousness. Can we explore this place, not using it as an instrument, for great narrative adventures, but just as a place of infinite connection. And I think that's the simple answer to your question.
Thank you. 다음 질문.
제가 학교에서 그 북방의 청사라는 공공미술 시간이었는데 북방의 청사라는 걸 보고 처음 안토니오 곰리라는 작가를 알게 되었는데 그런 큰 규모의 작품을 만드실 때 그 오직 작품만을 만드는데 그 중요한 의미를 두시지 않고 이제 그 지역 경제와 그 다음에 사람들 간에 그 만드는지 괜찮은지 그런 걸 다 일일이 얘기하고 상의하면서 2년 동안 긴 시간 동안을 준비해서 그렇게 큰 규모의 작품을 만드셨는데 어떻게 그런 작품을 만들게 되셨는지 생각을 여쭙고 싶어요.
그 북방의 천사라는 게 작품 이름인가요?
네, 북방의 천사.
어디에 있는 프로젝트?
그게 그 말씀하시면 아실 것 같은데
네네네.
네.
So the question is, I got to know the artist Antony Gormley first by I don't know if it's going to be the right title, but the Northern Angel project that took you
Yeah, the Angel of the North. Yeah,
Angel of
yeah.
the North, so which was a huge scale project, which if I recall correctly, took 2 years to
Yeah.
finish. I'm wondering, like, what type of, like, how you plan and coordinate with the community when pursuing such a long-term project. Like, isn't it too complex?
Yeah,
Like,
this was, I mean, I think this is a good model because you could say this is a pre-modern, you know, this is a work that was commissioned by the community of Gateshead and Newcastle and was made with them. I couldn't have made it alone. I had to find the shipwrights, the people who knew how to bend 6mm ship plate, who knew how to weld the relation of a rib and a hull together. The wondrous thing about that is that this was really a commission not from one patron but from a whole community to make something that could help them make this painful transition from the industrial to the information age. This was a part of Britain where there was coal mining, where there was shipbuilding, and both of those things had been eliminated. Margaret Thatcher decided that we couldn't compete on the international market, either in shipbuilding or in the production of coal, and stopped a relationship that had taken hundreds of years to develop. So I wanted to say, what are the skills and what are the materials that this region of Britain are most familiar with? And that happens to be iron and steel. And then what can we make that will act as a kind of transitional object for the community? And that's what we made. And the important thing is that it sits on top of a mound. And what is that mound? That mound is on top of the lower Teme Valley colliery, where 60 meters below, men worked removing coal in very, very tight, dark circumstances. So the work works in relation to a very specific place and materializes against the sky in a way, a similar shaft and seam relation that exists underneath in the spaces below that mound. The angel was a very special project, and in a way, it isn't my angel. The angel belongs to the people of the Northeast.
Okay, thank you. I think we might take one more quick question if there is any remaining question. 혹시 질문 하나 있으시면 마지막으로 하나만 짧은 질문 하나 받겠습니다. 네.
항상 작품으로만 작가님 뵙다가 왠지 작가님이 이렇게 만남으로 나서 다음에는 작품 볼 때마다 작가님이 조금 떠오를 것 같아서 오늘 재밌는 경험이었는데요. 저는 이번에 주제가 탄소 발자국으로 잡혔을 때 조금 모순이라고 생각했습니다. 작가님 작품이 말씀하셨지만 굉장히 무겁거나 아니면 사실은 자연에서 온 재료를 아닌 작품을 많이 봤기 때문에 그런 생각이 들었는데요. 이번 대화를 통해서 작가님의 조금 의중은 알 수는 있었는데 굉장히 조금 재미없고 본질적인 질문을 한 개 드리자면 왜 작가님의 작품이 금속성을 많이 가진 물성을 가진 재료를 많이 쓰신다고 생각하는데 그 물성을 선택하게 된 이유도 조금 궁금하고요. 또 다음 작품에서는 또 어떤 물성을 가진 재료에 관심이 조금 있으신지 궁금합니다.
So thank you for your wonderful presentation. So I have been really familiar with your works, but now seeing you and getting to know you through this session, I think when I look at your artwork next time, it would make me feel that as if I'm now more attached and closer to you. So my question was, as I was registering for this today's session, which titled "Sustaining for the Future: Carbon Footprint," I thought the title itself didn't really match well with you, in particular, because you use the materials that are not particularly coming from the nature itself, but rather metal or steel instead. So I would like to ask why in particular you use these materials as your primary sources, and do you have any plans in the future to be experimenting with any other materials in particular?
It's a really good question, and the truth is, I wanted to use the common materials of our built environment. I don't use glass, but I use steel, concrete, and brick clay. They are all, in a way, the materials that we have constructed our world out of. And I use them as much to question them as I do to, you could say, take advantage of their qualities. I think that sculpture is of its nature a way of translating fugitive human feelings and thoughts into materials that will endure longer than our biological bodies. And I think that's been at the back of my mind in terms of thinking about sculpture. I want to make things that will last. But that doesn't mean to say that I don't also make things that don't last at all. So, you know, Host, for example, that the seawater went back into the sea, the clay went back into the earth. So there are elements of my work that increasingly are temporary, and yeah, I am looking into all sorts of other materials. I mean, I've used light and water in blind light, for example. Host is just water, seawater and clay. We are making much more work in wood. But I think it's a viable question. Why, if you care about the environment, do you use the very things that, in a sense, are the problems, or are examples of the materials that have caused, if you like, carbon footprint rise? Well, the answer is that that's the very reason why I use them. I want us to be face to face with the very things that in a sense we have become dependent upon. I think that art has to register its moment, and these are, in a way, the extensions of, these are the materials that extend our body in a contemporary built environment.
Thank you so much for your explanation. I think considering the time remaining, I think we should conclude today's session here.
Right.
Thank you so much again, Mr. Gormley, for joining today's session and for your wonderful presentation.
Thank you for having me, and yes, I hope that everyone gains a lot from all of the works that are on show at the Busan Art Fair, and thank you for inviting me.
Thank you so much. 오늘 강연은 여기까지 마치도록 하겠습니다. 감사합니다. Thank you, Antony.
감사합니다.